Good morning, City Club. My name is Jacob Fain, and I am your board president. Thank you, everybody, for coming out for today's forum. We've got a very exciting one on board. As I was looking over the roster, we've got a full house here and equally full online. So welcome to all of our virtual attendees today. Thank you for being here and being part of this conversation. On your table, we have little table tents, which tells you how to ask questions for today's forum. Questions will be filtered through, and our moderator will be asking those. And before we get started, I always want to make sure we thank our sponsors, who are our annual and supporting sponsors, starting with ASI Wealth Management, the City of Bend, Central Oregon Community College, Oregon State University Cascades Campus, St. Charles, Pacific Source, Central Oregon Association of Realtors, and Brooks Resources. And today I am proud to sponsor this forum as a member of the Desert Pine Group at Morgan Stanley. As you all know, City Club is a member and sponsor supported organization, so thank you to all of our sponsors and our members today. Now, for those of you who have been attending forums through this year, today's moderator is no stranger to us. It is the special projects reporter for the Bulletin, Zach DeMars. This is our fourth forum with the Bulletin and Zach. So if you have not had a chance, please take some time after the forum today to read his pieces in last Sunday's paper about water and drought in our region. So Zach, the forum is now yours.
Great. Well, good morning, afternoon, good day, everybody. Excited to be here, excited to be back at City Club with a few hundred of my closest friends. We got a really great forum today that I'm excited to share with you all, so we will get started right away by meeting some of our panelists. So if you all want to come up and join me, and we'll run through some introductions of our panelists here. Well, today we've got Kate Fitzpatrick, the Executive Director of the Deschutes River Conservancy. She's worked with the DRC since 2004, developing and implementing collaborative strategies to restore stream flow and water quality to the Deschutes Basin. Kate has a passion for rivers and for the power of community to find solutions to tough problems. She's got a BA in geology and an MS in environmental studies. Next up, we have Mike Bittner, who's the Director of Utilities for the City of Bend. He leads a diverse group of 100 or more water, wastewater, and stormwater professionals to operate and maintain the City of Bend's 3 utilities. Mike has worked for the city for 8 years, and when he isn't working on water, wastewater, or stormwater issues, he prefers to be standing in the water with a fly rod. Next up, we've got Aaron Kilcullen, who serves as the head of the management team of the Deschutes Soil and Water Conservation District, which provides local leadership, technical assistance, information, and access to state and federal cost-share programs to make positive changes on our land. Aaron has a BA in environmental geology and an MS in natural resources with a focus in restoration ecology. And last but certainly not least, Kevin Richards is a partner at Fox Hollow Ranch. He's a second-generation farmer and member of the Jefferson County Farm Bureau. Before returning to Madras in 2013, Richards served at the American Farm Bureau, the U.S. State Department, and the White House. The ranch is a diversified irrigated farm located in Central Oregon's high desert near Madras. Now, before we get too deep into our panel today, we do want to do some table setting. We could, of course, spend probably 2 weeks or an entire lifetime, as many people do, talking about water issues in the Deschutes Basin. Today, we're going to try and focus on some of the solutions, policies, and practices that are underway right now in the basin that could have an impact on the drought that we're experiencing. So to set the stage a little bit, we've got some slides up here just to run through some basics about the basin so we're all kind of starting on the same playing field. We're talking largely today about the Upper Deschutes Basin, which runs from Crescent Lake down to Madras and through our 8 irrigation districts in Central Oregon. There we go. And so this is a view of how water rights are distributed across the Deschutes Basin. So about 86% of the basin's water rights as they currently exist are dedicated to agricultural uses. 12% of rights are dedicated to the river itself, and just about 2% go to municipal needs. So you can see the little, the wheat there is the irrigation, the little river is the in-stream needs, and the little house is municipal needs. I'm very excited about that graphic. So, and next up, this is a projection of the needs that are unmet in the Deschutes Basin. So you see that a large share of the unmet needs, about 80%, are in-stream needs. So that is the water that flows through the river. It gives habitat to the fish and the frogs and the other species which live in the basin. And the other 20% of unmet needs, according to the 2019 basin study, comes for agricultural uses. We're going to touch through a number of the pain points along the river and in the basin today, but I will leave that to some of our more eloquent panelists. One last thing to note here when we're setting the table, though, really important for making this entire system of irrigation districts and water rights work is having water in the first place. As you all surely know, our water largely comes from Snowpack in the Cascades, which has been on the decline over the past several decades. You can see here the green line is the median year, and the black line on the chart is this year's snowpack level. So you'll see that the late spring snow that we got did help us out a little bit, but there's still a large part of the year there that is below the median. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into our panel discussion. Well, to start, we're going to talk about some of the key pain points in the basin. Kate, do you want to tell us a little bit about, and I'll throw up the slide there with the summer and winter. Do you want to tell us a little bit about some of the pain points the river itself experiences along the way throughout the year?
Sure, Zach. Thank you. And I guess I have to be eloquent now that you've keyed that up. Also want to thank City Club for talking about water. It's central to all of us, and so happy that you're here to listen and contribute to the conversation. Again, water is complex, so we'll try to keep it fairly simple, but just a little background that 80% of in-stream flow that is not met is not just a function of the recent drought, which is making everything worse, but it's a function of a water management system that was in place over a century ago to help settle the West, where water rights, more water was given away out of the stream than exists in this stream in the summer months. So that's an important point that we've been playing catch up on the riverside for a very long time, and I think Kevin will get into some of the difference in priority dates between the irrigation districts as well that play into this. And we do have pain points, as you say, throughout the basin for flows, where flows are critically low or highly altered. Today we're going to focus on the main stem Deschutes, and just wanted to give you a snapshot here with this graphic, what we're looking at. The Deschutes is really controlled by the storage and diversion of water for irrigated agriculture. There's 5 irrigation districts that share water on the Deschutes system, and they all have different access to water based on the priority date of how long ago they got here. So what you see on the left is what happens in the wintertime. In Wikiup Reservoir, which is, I believe, about 72 miles south of here, the river does run south to north, which I'm sure most of you are aware of by now. And what happens is that storage reservoir is storage that North Union Irrigation District has the majority of rights to, as well as a little bit of other irrigation district rights in that reservoir. And they rely heavily on that water for their irrigated agricultural use. So in the winter, the flows are really shut down fairly low, about 10% of what they naturally would have been in the river, so that it can be stored for the next summer. So what you see is critically low flows below Wikiup Reservoir. Not many people are up there in the winter, and I guess we should say too, when you look out from the old mill all year round, the river looks pretty good. So one of the key points is there are really serious issues with our river, but you wouldn't know it unless you went upstream in the winter below Wickiup, or downstream. Actually, right outside the river house is a great place to see what happens in the summertime. So in the summertime, that water gets released for irrigation, and the flows are actually artificially high, about twice as high as they would be naturally, all the way through the city of Bend. And then most of that water gets diverted just upstream of the river house. So if you have a chance to go out and look off the deck after, you can see the river post-diversion at North Canal Dam, where only about, again, 10% of the natural flow is left in stream. And every drop of that is from projects and programs that the DRC and our irrigation partners and other partners have done throughout the years. So we'll get into the solution set, I think, later, but I just wanted to share, low flows in the winter below Wickiup, low flows in the summer below Bend, creating fish and wildlife issues for native red band trout, Oregon spotted frog, and in the upper Deschutes, the highly altered flows has created widespread erosion, really unraveling the geomorphic integrity of that entire reach. So the good news is every drop of water you see below by the river house now is a result of successful work we've been able to do together. So we have the tools, and we're going to talk about those. But we have a lot of work in front of us still to try to fix this problem. We've been putting on a seminar diving into water issues in depth, Raise the Deschutes, that you should all come to. But we had our second installment last night on full history of water rights, over an hour with Kyle Gorman from the Water Resources Department. But my colleague Lisa really said it well when she said there are no villains in this system. This is a relic of a water management system that the state put in place over 100 years ago. So there's no villains here, but we now have a choice on how we move forward into the future to meet needs for the river as well as all the stakeholders.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, and so, Kevin, how does this kind of lack of water overall, how does that impact you as somebody who, relies on the water for your livelihood and for running your farm?
Yeah, first off, to echo what Kate said earlier, thanks very much for the invitation to be here and for focusing on water. We farm in Madras, and this time of year we're pretty busy, so we feel pretty isolated from Bend. But we appreciate that all year round folks are concerned about water issues, and we really value some of the relationships and the opportunities to tell our story and hopefully work towards solutions. So thanks to City Club for having us here. So I like to say, and it's only slightly tongue-in-cheek, that North Unit Irrigation District is the first to suffer and suffers the most during a drought. So as Kate highlighted, there's 8 irrigation districts in Central Oregon, and the water rights for those irrigation dates have seniority dates. North Unit is the most junior holder, and most of our water comes as a storage right out of Wickiup Reservoir. What that means is when there's a deficit, when we're in a drought, we're kind of the last to get water. So if the buffet runs out, we go without pasta. And that's really the situation we're in right now. It's exacerbated because we're in multiple years of drought, which hasn't allowed Wickiup Reservoir to recharge to the level that it normally would. And so not only year to year do we not have water, but we're getting, the situation is getting more and more dire because Wickiup just isn't recovering due to, over the winter due to, snowpack and precipitation levels being lower. So what does that mean for us on our farm? It's pretty stark. So North Unit Irrigation District, on a typical year, you'd pay an assessment for an acre with water rights, and that would give you about 2 acre-foot of water, so about 24 inches of water. Many years there might be a little bit of excess that they can deliver. You pay a little bit extra for that. And so I think if you go back a couple, 2-3 decades, on average, most water rights, most irrigated farmland in North Unit Irrigation District has had about 2.25 acre-foot of water that's available for farming. This year, we started with 0.45. So that's about 20%, 25%. And if you can just imagine, a 9-to-5 job, if they said, "Hey, we're going to cut your salary to 20%, to see if you can pay your bills like that. Or if you're a business or a manufacturer and they said, hey, the number one input, the key input that you need for your business to survive, we're only going to give you 20% of it. And there's no villains, as Kate said, but that's the situation we're in. We have to learn how to survive, how to farm and make a living with 20% of our most crucial input. Even on a good year, when you're at that 2.5 acre foot of water, most crops, many crops, require more water than that. A lot of places around the world, if you said, we have an annual rainfall of about 9-10 inches, and we get 2 acre foot of water, how do you think it'd be easy to farm? And they said, no, we think it'd be hard to farm like that. And so, on a typical year, even on a good year, North Unit has to get creative, and the farmers have to use that water very efficiently and very wisely. And what that means is you have to be creative with your crop rotations, sometimes leave ground fallow and prioritize other ground and higher value crops. So, on a typical year, we might still, not have enough water, but 0.45 that we started this season with, it makes it a really tough situation that, multiple years of that, and you have families and people that have farmed for generations that really struggle and start to wonder if they can continue to do it.
And with that multiple years of drought, Kevin, you are still farming. This year you're still able to be out there. What sort of things have you been able to do to make do with that lower allocation and that the lower amount of water? What kind of things have you had to do to make that work?
A lot of different things. One thing that's an option is to actually take on the management of more acres. So we might get into this as a solution later on, but it's very difficult to transfer water between districts. But within a district, the water rights that you have in your account, you can pool those and then move them to the crops and the fields where they're most needed. And so what that means is that if there's a neighbor or another farm that thinks, I just want to lease my ground. It's too hard to farm right now, or maybe I'm retiring or something like that. Well, a farm like me can lease that ground, pool that water, and then use it elsewhere on other higher value crops. It's not quite as simple of a solution as it might sound, because there's still cost and management and overhead associated with that ground. So if my farm is growing in the acres that we have under our management, but we have less water, so we're actually farming a smaller amount, what that means is that our margins have been squeezed really tight, to the point of breaking. But it does allow us to access more water and hopefully continue to farm, a comparable number of acres that we might in a different year. Then, on farm, there's opportunities to find some efficiencies. On our farm, we've piped a lot of on-farm transmission, pipe to get to sprinklers and to get to distribution points. We've upgraded sprinkler packages to flow controlled, so we're being as efficient and trying to kind of just put exactly the amount of water on, exactly when and where it's needed. Those are pretty marginal solutions. Over the long run, they can make a big difference, but it's not a triage. You can't save a lot of water immediately with those types of investments. They take time and they're marginal efficiencies. And then, a big thing that we do is try to reach out and educate folks like you all and just help them understand what we do with the water, why it's valuable to us, and hopefully build some partnerships that help us get some long-term solutions. And so, as Kate said, I hope we get into it a little bit more, but I think the greatest hope for the long term, I hope to farm for a couple more decades at least, and I've got 5 kids. I think at least one of them will want to farm. So I plan to be here for a couple more generations on our farm. And so I'm really looking for long-term solutions, and I think that what that requires is good, meaningful partnerships, understanding that the way things are set up kind of isolates districts and individual users, and really the promises the hope is that we can work more collectively and kind of manage things and not treat it as a zero sum, so that we're all fighting for a smaller piece of pie, but we're managing it more holistically, and the water's going where it needs to go.
Great. Well, I want to touch on those kind of larger partnerships here in a minute, but Aaron, if you want to jump in, can you tell us a little bit about some of the resources and programs that are available for farms like Kevin for kind of that interim period before we get the larger, longer term solutions? What kind of resources are available for some of our farmers in the region?
Yeah, thanks, Zach, and thanks again for having me. This is a really great opportunity. And he touched a little bit on-farm practices. We have a program with other agencies, with DRC and some of the irrigation districts, and we have this term, irrigation water management, so IWM, and that includes on-farm practices, so making their on-farm systems more efficient. In Deschutes County, so I work for Deschutes Soil and Water Conservation Districts, and we work with private landowners to do voluntary conservation efforts on their property. And so a lot of our work is to provide technical assistance and help these landowners obtain some sort of funding, incentives to help them upgrade their irrigation systems. And so in Central Oregon Irrigation District, for example, they have a lot of flood irrigators. So they go out and they open a valve and it floods their fields. It's a lot of work for the landowner. They're having to manually divert their water, create channels, create ditches. And so converting those systems from flood to sprinkler. And that sprinkler can be a wheel line, it can be a large pivot, it can be hand lines, it could be a sprinkler system. So there's lots of different opportunities. And I think the really big importance of this is, like Kate and Kevin touched on, is with our current system, we all kind of have our hands tied. The system was set way back in 1900s. And so really just working with this antiquated system is challenging, and nobody is a villain, like they all said. And we just have, currently there's less water in the system. So even if you have a senior water right, Kevin has a junior water right, and they're working with less water, but everyone is receiving less water than their water right in general. And so trying to use that water as conservatively, as efficiently as possible. And so there are larger modernization projects that I'm sure Kate will touch on or Kevin will touch on, but really working with these farmers and producers to make their on-farm systems more efficient and make their water last longer throughout the season. And so we were lucky enough, we received funding through the county, Soil and Water Conservation District, Deschutes River Conservancy, and Central Oregon Irrigation District to assist landowners with an on-farm efficiency program. And there's a lot of interest, and we are only able to fund 15 projects, and they're very small-scale projects. We're contributing $20,000 to each of these projects, and we're finding that these projects are upwards of $40,000. And so it's a lot on the landowner to convert their systems to make them more efficient. And so on top of those 15 landowners, we had 33 applicants for that program, and we have a long list of just interested landowners that are calling weekly to try to upgrade their systems. And also piping their systems, creating different main lines down their farms is definitely more efficient as well, and getting rid of open ditches. So piping their on-farm canals and laterals is really efficient, helping them convert to more efficient pumps, creating lined ponds for water storage. There's lots of opportunities, and that is our organization's role, is to provide technical assistance. We also partner with the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which is a federal program, and they provide a great cost share opportunity for landowners. And then over the years piping cost has gone up. As we all know, cost has gone up in everything. And so we're all feeling the hit for that. And so their cost share program, what used to be 70% of their total efficiency upgrades, is now more looking like they're 40%. So really seeking out additional funding opportunities to assist landowners with their on-farm systems is our overarching goal. And I'm very new to the irrigation world, and I will say since I've started, just the collaboration between all organizations it's strong. Everyone's really trying their best, and it's really great to be a part of it.
So yeah, I mean, let's go ahead and dive in a little bit more on that collaboration piece. Kate, if you want to talk about some of the, kind of basin-wide, more broad efforts at not just kind of making the system work, but maybe making it better.
Yeah, absolutely. You see, well, I'll talk about some of the main tools we've used in the past that can help in-stream as well as shoring up irrigated agriculture. And then I'll talk about how we're innovating and expanding on that to meet some of these really challenging issues. So if you look at that priority date chart, I don't know if everybody understands that, but the people who are here first with the older priority date get the water first. And then when you get to 1913 in North Unit, as you heard, it's much more scarce. The Deschutes River was not, by the state, allowed to be a beneficial use of water, believe it or not, until 1987. So,
And can you tell us what beneficial use means?
Beneficial use is part of what a water right is. It has several characteristics, a water right. It's tied to the land. You have to use it beneficially, which is a pretty broad definition. It really just means you're greening up your property. And generally, in our area, it's agriculture. There's some municipal use, some industrial use. And now in-stream use is also a beneficial use since 1987. So the trick, though, on restoring the river is, when the in-stream water rights were applied for by the state, they took on a priority date of late 1980s. Those are never served. And so what we have to do as our organization is work with the old water rights to do projects and programs where we can get that senior priority date and protect it in-stream. So 3 of the major tools that we use, and I do want to agree with Aaron, the level of collaboration between irrigation districts in this basin is enormous. It's not something you see everywhere, and it's really the key to solving these issues. And so, canal piping. There's about 700 miles of irrigation canals and ditches in Central Oregon, and they were blasted into porous lava rock. So they lose, on average, about 50% of the water on the way to the farm. So that's an obvious place to look for water conservation. And so the irrigation districts are currently undertaking $150 million worth of piping projects to save an enormous amount of water. Even before this latest effort, I think we've restored about 100 cubic feet per second throughout the basin through piping. And when you pipe an irrigation district with a senior water right, you can take that saved water and protect it in stream so it doesn't need to get diverted, and it can't be diverted by anyone else. So, for example, Central Oregon Irrigation District just did a big piping project, $30 million, that saved 30 cubic feet per second. So we'll see flows in the upper Deschutes go from 100 to 130 this winter, actually even more than that due to some other projects. Arnold Irrigation District, or Steve Johnson, the manager, raise his hand. He's going to do a project this winter that pipes part of Arnold's canal, main canal, and restores 11.2 CFS of water saved. So that's one really important tool. I'm going to talk in a minute about how these link up with North Unit, but traditionally that water would just go in stream and be protected. So the other tools we have are in-stream leasing and in-stream transfers. So if you are a water rights holder, under Oregon water law, you have to use your water once every 5 years or you can lose that. In-stream leasing qualifies for a year of beneficial use. So if you're a farmer, a water rights holder, and you don't want to use your water 1 year, or you want to rotate some crops, we can pay you to not divert that water, and it will stay in the stream with that senior priority date. So if you look at the Deschutes River, again, right outside, about a third of that flow is from piping projects, conservation. About a third of that flow is in-stream leasing, like lots of little bits of water rights all over Central Oregon. And then in-stream transfers is the last tool that we have through the state. And that is a permanent change of use of a water right that you can actually transfer in-stream and protect that from diversion. In the past, we had some irrigation districts within the urbanizing area using that tool, and this is a little bit of a rabbit hole, but when you do that, you can generate mitigation credits that allow the city to actually pump groundwater in the future because the groundwater system is capped. So that's kind of an elegant solution that actually Arnold Irrigation District is initiating some projects along those lines, some permanent transfers coming up this year too. So those are the traditional tools to restore the Middle Deschutes, Tumalo Creek, Waiachus Creek. But you look at the issues we're facing in the upper Deschutes River, and it gets more complicated because you're trying to restore a reach below a reservoir. And if you remember, every drop of that reservoir is needed for North Unit Irrigation District. And after hearing Kevin, you can't really ask that irrigation district, hey, just release that stored water because we need it in the river, because they really don't have any water to spare. So that's where the sort of unprecedented collaboration within the irrigation districts is happening. The more senior irrigation districts close to Bend and Redmond have more available water rights. Kevin said they usually get by in about 2 acre-feet per acre. These districts usually receive at least 4 acre-feet per acre, so twice as much water, different soils and different needs, but generally there's water to be saved in this part of the basin. Again, through piping, through incentivizing people to use less water, through on-farm efficiency work that Aaron talked about, through in-stream leasing. And then you can take that water and really allow junior users, in particular North Unit Irrigation District, to access that senior water from the river so they don't need the stored water, and then they can release that stored water to help the ecosystem. So it's a very complex, interconnected movement of water where it ties everybody, all these partners in the basin, very tightly together. And there's a lot of meetings, and there's a lot of collaboration, and the conversations aren't always easy, but we're doing it. And you know, kudos to the irrigation district to be pouring so much energy when really their job is to deliver water to their patrons. So it's pretty remarkable. You know, trying to tie all these projects and programs together and get the level of funding we need. We also are working on a comprehensive basin plan that will meet water for the cities, for irrigation, and for rivers into the future, including under climate change. We have a Deschutes Basin Water Collaborative, which is a 46-member group that's undertaking this plan. So you can imagine how those conversations go. And we hope that when we have that plan together, we can continue to increase the amount of funding coming in for these projects and maybe get some policy flexibility, because what we're trying to do, Kevin alluded to the fact that it's hard to move water between irrigation districts. Water law is a very clunky thing. If you want to learn more, check out our seminar from last night. And so having a little bit of flexibility to be more adaptive as we're facing drought and climate change will be important. And I would like to think we'll put ourselves in a position to approach the state for some of that flexibility. So yeah, the last thing I'll mention is having the public engaged in understanding water and supporting solutions and contributing to the conversation is really important. And it's kind of black box for people because water rights and water law and water masters are kind of archaic. So we did launch a seminar series called Raise the Deschutes. You can go to our website, but it's free. Once a month, we're putting on a seminar that takes a deep dive into all these topics that I high level hit on, and it's available by live stream or video. So there's my shameless plug to keep you all involved in understanding about water.
Thanks, Kate. I want to jump over to Mike now. I think one common concern people have when it comes to water is seeing that Deschutes County and the Central Oregon region, the population has grown a lot. Can you touch on, I guess, to start, where the city of Bend gets its water, but also how the city's been able to have enough water for the population growth that we've seen?
Yeah, sure. Well, hey, building on earlier comments, thank you, Zach. Thank you, Zach, for the invitation and just having this opportunity to talk about water. Quick side note, go read that article that Zach wrote about water. Anytime somebody calls us and says, hey, we're going to write an article about urban water use and agricultural water use and try and thread that needle and have it make sense, I get a little nervous. I know Kate does too. I know others do in the basin. But Zach did it wonderfully. He also took the initiative to call us up and was one of the first reporters to request to go out on a ride with our staff. So seeing this stuff firsthand. So we appreciate these forums to have accurate, intelligent conversations about water. This is what we need more of. So thank you, Zach, for the opportunity. Making sure you're hearing me here on this microphone. Okay. So as far as the City of Bend's water sources and our water supplies, maybe just a quick overview there. The City of Bend is fairly unique in that we have 2 sources of water supply. We have surface water as well as groundwater. That's really unique. In Central Oregon, all of your other cities are 100% groundwater. And so a lot of the complexities that you're hearing Kate discuss and Kevin discuss, we have these conversations as well. We have a stake in this conversation. We have some very, very close relationships with Tumalo Irrigation District, whom we share a water right with for surface water. but we also have groundwater. And so those two sources of supply together, I think, have really been beneficial for us to get through some pretty challenging times recently and moving forward. From a ratio standpoint, surface water versus groundwater, surface water is our primary source of water supply. It has been for nearly 100 years. Typically, our total allocation or demand over the course of a year is about 65% on the surface water side, 40% on the groundwater side. Having those two sources allows us quite a bit of operational flexibility. As a utility director, that's a feather in our cap to be able to have two sources so that when we do have things that happen to us, like long extended drought or a chlorine shortage that we had a year ago, or a mechanical failure, we don't have all of our eggs in one basket. We don't have all of our water supplies in one spot. So we can rotate between those two sources to really navigate the complexities of the water world in the 21st century and really kind of keep our economy, keep our community moving forward. A couple other things I'll say about the water utility. So the City of Bend owns 3 utilities: a water utility, a wastewater utility, and a stormwater utility, as Zach mentioned in the intro. Our water utility serves water to about 70% of the Bend community. The remainder is served by two private water utilities, Avion Water Company and Rotes Water System, both longtime private water utilities that have been in existence, I think, since the 1960s. And so we have good relationships with those utilities. But in terms of where our water comes from, for the City of Bend, our community, if you're from a City of Bend customer, it's a combination of surface and groundwater. If you're an Avion or Rotes customer, it's 100% groundwater.
And as far as the population growth that the city has seen in the past, I think 20 years, there's a particular chart that I'm thinking of that I think you're probably thinking of as well that shows the growth over the past 20 years and the really not any growth in the peak demand of daily water use. So how does the city manage that growth?
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. So as far as population growth, yes, we've seen exponential population growth in Central Oregon, especially in Bend over the last 20 years. The saving grace for us is really the per capita drop that we see and experience. The water use per person continues to drop. That's a national trend that you'll see in any urbanized community you go to. We build homes a little bit more efficiently than we used to. Our lots are a little bit smaller than we used to build them. And so the amount of water that we use as humans continues to drop. And so as we continue to see exponential growth, 5, 10, however many people move here per day, per week, per month, I forget the number, but that is helping us tremendously because that savings is offsetting the number of people that are landing here in Bend and in Central Oregon. On top of that, I think one of the key drivers there is really the density. We are dense communities here. You're seeing that across urbanized communities across the country, but in Oregon specifically with our land use laws that really promote density in urban environments, the amount of water that we're using outdoors for lawns isn't half of what it was 20 years ago. Think about when a family of 4 moves here today. You think about this housing development that's right outside the river house right here, the point on the river's edge. I was just looking at it as I came in here. All of those houses are probably 2,000 square feet or less. They all have EPA WaterSense devices in them, most likely. All of the landscapes are 5,000 square foot or less, and they're all drip irrigation. Right? That's how you build a home in 2020. 20 years ago, it was a little bit different. The toilets maybe weren't EPA WaterSense. There was some flexibility there. The lot size was quite a bit larger, and the total water use per person is really, really impacted by the size of that lot. So the overall density and the drive that we have there from a development standpoint is also really, really helping us accommodate growth from a water standpoint.
And how does that play out with future projections of future growth? Probably no shortage of people continuing to move to Bend in the next several decades. So, have you kind of looked at if there will be enough water and how you make sure you get enough water to new folks who move here?
Yeah, absolutely. So as an urban water utility, we have to produce a water management and conservation plan that really looks closely at those projections. What are our population projections? What are our demand projections long term? And then making sure that we have available water supply to meet those things, both day-to-day indoor water use, but also that peak day seasonal demand that we know that we have here in Bend. So we look at the long-term projections, we look at our water supplies to make sure that we have adequate supplies, and then we turn that document into the state for review. And what we're really required is to have enough water for the next 20 years, to provide enough water for the next 20 years of growth. But I'll be really honest with you, Zach, that's not enough. That's really where we need to go a little bit further, I think, as a state and as communities, and really look beyond that. And so in the city of Bend, we certainly do. We're very comfortable for the next 20 years as far as the amount of water we have and our population projections. That's should be a bit of comfort for those that are City of Bend water customers. But my job is to worry about between 20 and 100 years, and what's that look like? What do our climate models look like? What does our surface water system look like? And what do groundwater level declines look like over that time? We've really got to pay close attention to a lot of that and make sure that we're managing it. But we do, and I think that the state of Oregon has a pretty robust process as far as creating water management conservation plans. These are publicly available documents that are available on our website that really shine a light on here's our water system, here's our water rights, here's our approach to conservation, and do it in a very transparent way that gives the community, I think, a level of confidence that we're going to be able to navigate some pretty uncertain times moving forward.
Well, great. Okay, thank you. I think we've gotten kind of a high-level view of a lot of different angles here, and I want to jump into our audience questions here in just a minute. There should be instructions on your tables if you'd like to submit questions to our panelists. I invite you to do so. But before we jump into that, a lot of these conversations are very high-level, very policy-oriented conversations. But what are some things, and hoping to hear, hopefully from all of you, what are some things that individuals, individual people can do to have maybe not the hugest impact, but cumulatively an impact on drought in the basin? If anybody feels particularly inspired, feel free to jump in.
I'll jump in first, Zach, and then let the big water quantities talk about how they would approach it. For me, for urban water users, for Bend water customers, know how much water you use, right? If you want to participate in this conversation, if you want to jump in and offer policy recommendations and get into the water world, look at your water bill first and foremost. Sign up for WaterSmart. That's the City of Bend's online portal. It will provide you access to your water use data. You can look at it. You can set notifications. You can set them really low and nerd out like I do so that you get a text every day that tells you how much water you used yesterday. You can do a lot of different things. But knowing how much water you use as an individual, I think, is a good start.
I got a text from the city last year that said, "We think you might have a water leak," and I went out to my spigot and it was leaking, and I was really impressed with that. So pay attention, sign up for those notifications. Yeah, I think we need a culture of stewardship no matter where you sit in the basin. If you're in the city, try to be as careful as you can with your water use. Think about, native plants instead of lawn, all those things. If you have acreage, think about upgrading your efficiencies. Work with Aaron's group to, help get some funding and some technical support to do that, and know that there's scarcity in the basin. When you're in the Bend bubble and there's green fields everywhere, you can forget that there's fallowed fields up north and that there's low stream flows. So, it's on all of us to really do what we can. And then if you don't fall into, well, everyone falls into one of those categories, but even aside from, doing your best in your own, I think it's so important to understand what's happening with water and that it's central to our community. Get engaged, support the solutions. The system that we've been given from 125 years ago doesn't make perfect sense anymore, and we're working within that to make change. But what should it look like? Your voice is really important. What do you care about? How should water be used? And then how can you advocate for the solutions that make sense and support the groups and the partners working on those solutions?
Yeah, I'm gonna go high level and expand on Kate's. It really, for us down in North Unit, one of our most valuable resources after water is advocates. And so events like this, but more than that, coming out and visiting farms around Madras and North Unit and getting dust on your boots and seeing what we do. The type of farming we do north of here is a lot different than the farming that happens around here. And our farm and many other farms have kind of an open gate policy where we're really eager to have people come out and learn about what we do with the water, the crops we grow, and how we're doing our best to be good stewards of the resources that we have. Farm Bureau hosts tours regularly Coalition for the Deschutes hosted a tour early this summer. Land Watch has hosted tours in the past, and I really encourage you to get out there and see and dig in deep to the differences and kind of the challenges, and realize that what you see, driving around Bend, that water has a different priority date, is raising different crops. There's just a world of difference in diversity throughout the basin. We've hosted a lot of folks for tours on our farm. We've yet to have, as far as I know, anybody that at the end hasn't said, wow, I had no idea. I appreciate, that you're looking for solutions, and how can we help? And so that is a really valuable resource to have that level of support and advocacy throughout the basin.
Yeah, I want to reiterate what everyone said. I'm not sure if my mic is working. There we go. So we mainly work with agricultural producers, and like Kevin said, Deschutes County is very different than Jefferson County. It's a lot smaller tax lots, more hobby farmers. There's new landowners coming in every day purchasing 40 acres with a pivot. And I just want to reiterate to everyone that there is a lot of organizations to assist everyone in this process. We are all here to work together, whether that be you have a hobby farm and you want to make your system more efficient. If you want to plant a pollinator garden, we're actually partnering with the city of Bend on working with communities to remove turf grass and plant pollinator species and switch their sprinklers to drip irrigation. So there's lots of opportunities for everyone to make improvements to conserve water throughout Deschutes County and the basin. And I think the real good point is, education, and talk to your neighbors. You're going to learn from everyone around you, and everyone's here to assist with this process and conserving water as much as we can.
Great. Well, thanks, everybody. We've got a number of questions here, and if you have other questions, please feel free to add them to our queue here. We'll try and get to as many as we can today, and then if there are extras left over at the end of today, we will try and get answers out via email to those of you who are registered today. Seems like our number one question is about piping, as you may have imagined. So, a lot of our questions about the impact of piping on wells, so how piping canals, irrigation canals, impacts nearby wells and impacts the water table underground. Maybe I'm thinking, Kate, you might be the right place to start with this question. Can you talk first a little bit about how those two things are even related, and then what the impact of piping is on some of our wells?
Fun questions. So surface water and groundwater in the Deschutes are directly one-to-one connected because of that porous volcanic geology. So if you pump water from the ground, you're going to see an impact somewhere in a stream, and vice versa. So we have a vast but not unlimited aquifer underneath us. It's called the regional aquifer, and it's pretty thick. It's like over 1,000 feet thick. We are seeing groundwater declines, and the sort of aridification of the last couple of decades is really starting to show up, where some wells are not recovering with the hydrologic cycle, particularly the farther you get from the Cascade recharge zone. So northeast of Bend and Redmond is where you're seeing the worst impacts, but we're seeing them kind of throughout the basin. So that is something to worry about. It is largely driven by the decline in precipitation. There is an impact on when you pipe canals, and there is an impact from new groundwater pumping, of course, because they're all connected to the aquifer. And it's also really important, this is not to say it's okay that your wells are going dry. It's absolutely of concern, but it is important to put it in context that again, those 700 miles of leaky canals that I mentioned that lose half the water to the ground, that's at the expense of a healthy river. So you've actually diverted that water and put it out on the landscape, and it's contributed to what we like to call artificial recharge. So some portion of the aquifer is sort of at the expense of the river. So I think that's just an important context point when we think about how important it is to manage groundwater and surface water together into the future and try to meet the needs that we want to meet. There was a USGS study kind of looking at the relative contributions to the groundwater declines, and I believe 5/8 of the declines were attributed to precipitation declines, 2/8 was attributed to groundwater pumping and 1/8 was attributed to canal piping impacts. So, it's potentially could be having an impact, but it's a smaller portion of the bigger issue, which is really precipitation declines. The state is really starting to take a hard look at groundwater declines in the Deschutes because for so long it was thought to be this unlimited, vast reservoir. And so it will be interesting to see how they start, thinking about how to manage groundwater a little bit differently, really to protect, wells and users and high-value springs where that water might come back. So as a river restoration advocate, I'm an advocate of piping. I think that water, that's one of the main tools to restore our rivers. I also think it's super important to steward our groundwater resources, and I think there's many ways we can still do that. So it's kind of the beginning of what's going to be an interesting conversation over the next several years. I should mention there are state resources to help people deepen their wells, and so I don't know how easy that money is to access, but the state has recognized that's an issue people are dealing with more and more, and there are resources available to help with that. Anybody else want to chime in on that one?
I'll just add one thing about, so the piping, in addition to piping the canals, that also can bring pressurized water to the landowners that are on that canal, which has huge benefits for their farm and water savings. So a lot of irrigation districts, they're all different with how they convey their water, but if you're on a rotation system, and then currently with the decrease in water, some irrigation districts, they're only getting their water every other week. So piping these canals and then creating a pressurized system is more of an on-demand system. So you can take the water when you actually need it, and then over time, you'll see that you're using less water to keep more water within the system.
And another question on piping projects here, with the savings that we see, the efficiency savings that we see from those projects, does all of that water, is that going to go back in stream, or is some of that going to be allocated to different users, the amount that's saved there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, the current plan of most of the irrigation districts, and there's some in the room if they want to chime in, is to pipe the canals and all of the water saved, generally 100% of the water, particularly within COID and Arnold, here in the Ben Redmond area, will actually be made available to North Unit Irrigation District as senior water to pick up. That will then be an equivalent amount released as in-stream flow restoration in the winter below the reservoir. So there's a one-to-one conservation in-stream flow restoration savings. It just happens to do a little sidetrack through North Unit on the way. So it's really a multi-benefit project where North Unit gets better water rates. They're able to release more in-stream flow in the winter when we really need it for fish and wildlife.
Our next question here is much more broad. How, with climate change as our context, how sustainable is farming in the high desert in the future, knowing that we're going to have a warmer, drier planet? How sustainable is our future of farming? Maybe Kevin, if you want to start here.
Good, I hope. No, it's a good question. The best answer I can give is if you walked around mini farms today versus 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, they look a lot different. And so, farming seems like an old-fashioned profession, but it's pretty sophisticated, and it's pretty progressive, and most of the farmers that I interact with are really thinking about sustainability, the long term, being competitive, just like any other business owner. And so, I didn't mention it earlier, but on our farm, for example, a typical year, 20-25% of our irrigated acres are drip irrigated. 25 years ago, there was no drip irrigation in Central Oregon, not on a commercial scale. And so now during the drought, closer to 30-35% of our acres are drip irrigated. that it's not easy to do, but it's, we adapt. We are progressive. We look for ways to improve what we're doing and be efficient and economical with what we're doing. And so, what that means is that we adopt new technology when it's available. The crops and our rotation changes over time as we find, new markets and establish international markets and that type of thing. And so, I don't expect that if my kids are farming 20, 30 years from now, it's going to look exactly the same. But I do think that we have, we've got to feed the world, I guess, is the cliche way to put it. And so, we have to find a way to adapt and be efficient with what we have. And I think that if done right and done collaboratively, that it's sustainable and we can do it.
Other thoughts on this question?
I'll chime in, Zach. Sure. City guy will chime in on this agricultural conversation. To Kevin's point about changes in the future, I think the city of Bend, is sort of trying to understand what our role is in, how can we help, groups like North Unit Irrigation District. For us, we'll be looking at that regional perspective as we approach, our day-to-day and our operational activities. One of the things that we'll look closely at is water reuse, right? We're treated effluent. Our wastewater facility right now collects about 6 million gallons per day, treats that. We feel like comfortably we could produce 2.5 million gallons a day per Class A water reuse. The regulatory framework in Oregon right now to get that to a farm is so complicated, it's not possible. And I really look for some changes in the next 5-10 years there where, down the road, the cities are making this a more sustainable venture through more creative reuse of our treated effluent.
Let me just piggyback on that a little bit more. I mean, that's why the advocacy for us as a farmer is so important, is because it's not just a matter of partnering with Aaron and putting in some new sprinklers. That's important. That's work that it's low-hanging fruit in a lot of farms, even farms that are doing it on an ongoing basis. You have to continue to invest. But it's really the regulatory hurdles, and we're not just dealing with an aging infrastructure, but an aging policy framework. And so that's why it's so important to understand it and to realize that we're not just saying, well, we got to spend more money. We're saying we got to fix the whole system. We got to think about, on a regulatory basis, on a policy and legal framework, where can we make improvements? Some of the big solutions we're talking about, piping or changing points of diversion downstream, closer to North Unit. Some of those big projects, those are huge investments. And the infrastructure that we're dealing with now, it was initially a public investment. It was something that the federal government, in North Unit's case, the federal government built a reservoir and built a canal system so that the desert could bloom. And if we want to maintain that, it's going to require a public effort, whether that's policy, whether that's financial, whether it's just finding the funds to do it. And that's why the advocacy piece for us is so important. And that's why I'm optimistic that we can adapt. We just need you to understand, what's necessary for us to adapt.
Our next question here, kind of in the shorter term, what role does private industry have in this conversation and in strategic conservation planning? So specifically listed here, things like breweries and golf courses and other large kind of private water users. What is their role in this conversation?
I'll take a stab at that and then let the rest of the panel chime in. As far as industry, the City of Bend provides water to a lot of industries. We don't provide water directly to any golf courses, except with the exception of Pronghorn Golfers, who we've sold water reuse to off and on over the last 10 years. As Kate said earlier, I think everybody has to approach this with stewardship in mind. And what I run across when I run into commercial businesses and industries is that understanding is already there, either through a water ethic, a conservation ethic, or through a financial ethic. I was curious about breweries when I first got here. are these breweries using, a good portion of our water? Do we bottle up a big portion of our supply and send it out of town? The answer is no. It's completely false. All 22 breweries that we deliver water to make up less than 3% of the total water that we produce as a city, okay? 62% is single-family residential water use. So if you want to save water, look in your backyard. I've been through Deschutes Brewery, I've been through Crux, I've been through Tenborough. We've had conversations with all of those staffs. They have sustainability groups, they have energy groups. They look at their bottom line. They're pretty efficient all the way around. When they're not, they call us and they want to know how we can help. We have really, really great relationships there. But I would say that, Kevin mentioned the regulatory framework. There are some obstacles there for some of our industries to really reuse their water after they use it in processing. We have some industries in town that take our water that's ridiculously clean, ready to drink, treat it to an even higher level, use it for their processing, and then treat it as wastewater. That water is so clean, it doesn't necessarily have to go into our sewer, but we don't really have a strong regulatory framework to go do something different with it, right? To feed the irrigation system, to feed a different user, maybe nearby. So those are some of the things that I think we can explore in the future. But by and large, I think that most industry and commercial businesses, are going to approach this with a stewardship ethic and really probably take advantage of conservation programs and services that, water utilities and others provide. But I know there's a larger conversation there, so I'll have others chime in.
I would just add that as an organization always trying to fund this work, that we're trying to cultivate corporate funders who are interested in offsetting their water use and having stewardship in that way. The Deschutes Brewery used to pay us directly to lease water and stream a billion gallons a year. Intel funds us to put water in stream to meet their water offset goals. Facebook, Apple, we've gotten money from all these companies who are really committed to stewardship. So selfishly, I'm always looking to look into the corporate world for help to solve the problem and put your money where your mouth is.
Well, we've touched on a number of, kind of high-level regulatory changes. One question here that I think is interesting, what would it take to actually change the antiquated, 100-year-old system? What would it take to not just kind of patch the holes in it, but change the system, and where might a community start in changing that system?
I'm happy to take a stab at it because it's near and dear to my heart of how to have policy keep up with the needs, because the current system isn't serving in our basin farmers or the river. It's a very acute example of that. I think the state of Oregon is understanding its policy framework isn't up to the task statewide. There's crises everywhere and we're not able to catch up quickly enough. There's a lot of talk of, well, do you just throw the whole prior appropriation system out the window? I mean, that's a thing, and I don't think we're there yet. Where we're kind of focused on is, and this is where I think the Deschutes has a really unique opportunity. The state is really interested in supporting basin-wide planning and management. And so in the Deschutes, with the level of collaboration we have, can we bring to the legislature a set of policy tools that we all agree to, that meet Kevin's needs, meet the river's needs, meet the needs of senior water rights holders, and ask for some more flexibility to do things a little bit differently. So I think in the near term, it's a little bit more flexing and innovating around the policy framework. If things got bad enough at some point, the whole system might fall apart. And I don't think we're quite at that level of scarcity in the Deschutes. And it would be really kind of nifty to be able to model really for the whole West how a basin can come together with some innovative policy ideas without upsetting the whole apple cart. Because while the system doesn't make any sense, we also have communities built around that assurance of water rights. And so how do you change that gracefully is kind of, I think, a really fascinating question. So this is a lot of the work we're doing at the Deschutes Basin Water Collaborative and with our partners, or what are the things we can ask for that support everybody, but make it easier to move water around to where it's needed, particularly in climate change situations where we're needing to adapt more quickly to a certain drought year and things like that.
I'll attempt to add on to that, Zach. That's a heck of a question. I think top-down statewide leadership on conservation is what we need in the 21st century. I think that what we see across the nation is state by state, whether you're California a few years ago going through making conservation a way of life, a broad set of sweeping pieces of legislation that really, catapulted water conservation into the future in that state. It wasn't until they really had to get to the 11th hour and really go through a curtailment and emergency conservation exercise. We shouldn't have to get to that point to really have, I think, broad support at the top down. I'm saying, Oregon across the board here, that will bring resources and capacity to the agencies that we work with. I think that those of us that work with Oregon Water Resource Department and Department of Environmental Quality, have good relationships with these staff. We work with them every day, but we see what's going on the other side there, and there's not enough. There's not enough staff. There's not enough resources to really do what you just said, to really overhaul this thing. And so that doesn't come without top-down leadership, and that will bring those resources. And then great groups like the 4 panels you see here and a ton of other groups like the Deschutes Basin Water Collaborative will really help fill in, the action items and the details of how we execute.
Other thoughts on this question of big, broad change?
I think I've kind of forgot what the initial question is, but I think the two big things that I think are most important, and I think the word Kate used early on was that the level of collaboration in the basin is really unprecedented. I think you'd be really hard pressed to find a group of 8 different irrigation districts, 8 kind of competing in a sense, not literally competing, but different water users that collaborate quite like they are right now in the basin, along with partners like Kate and the DRC and many other stakeholders. That's really unprecedented, and I think maintaining those relationships and kind of standing shoulder to shoulder, I think that's really, really important. The other thing is money. To be perfectly honest, a lot of the things that are really going to improve the infrastructure and just the collective management are just going to be expensive. And so whether it's a piping project, whether it's upgrading individual deliveries within irrigation districts, whether it's big ambitious projects like changing the point of diversion for North Unit closer to Lake Billy Chinook, they're frankly going to be very expensive. So we need some state and federal partnerships that help us make it feasible.
Great. Anything else on top of that, Aaron?
I was going to add that I just think, which I think that Deschutes Basin is already doing a great job at, as everyone said, is just staying ahead of the curve. I mean, we all see what's occurring on the Colorado River, and just really staying ahead of that. We don't want all of a sudden to have to decrease our water by 25% on a short-term basis, and just really collaboratively working, continually searching for funding, and even as an urban community member, I mean, really educating and advocating for what is occurring within the basin, even if it doesn't on a day-to-day basis affect your daily life, what a farmer's doing out in Madras or in Redmond. But we all need to work together, and what's conserved on that farm can have huge benefits to everyone in the urban community.
Great. Well, with that, we have a lot of other questions that unfortunately we won't be able to get to today. What we'll do is ship them around to our esteemed panelists and get some answers out to all of you. There are obviously lots of areas of this that we didn't touch on, but thank you so much for joining us for today's panel. As we talked about before, this is the Bulletin's 4th panel in partnership with the City Club. We're really grateful for the opportunity to share our reporting, and I hope you'll continue to follow our coverage of water issues in the basin and consider subscribing to support that work. With that, thank you all again. I'll hand it back to Kim Gammond, the Executive Director of City Club of Central Oregon.
Thank you, Zach, Aaron, Kate, Michael, and Kevin for being here today and being willing to lead us in a difficult discussion and conversation. And thank you to the Bulletin for continuing our partnership on these forums. There are a lot of upcoming opportunities to continue this conversation. One of them is on September 1st, Community Conversations will host a dinner and discussion titled Let's Talk About Water, and that will be at the library and available virtually. And then, as mentioned, the Deschutes River Conservancy is hosting a series, Raise the Deschutes, and their next event is in September 12th, as well as they have recordings on their website from the past forums. You can also subscribe to our newsletter, and we will continue to post as we hear more and more continued discussion about water and drought in our region, including an upcoming discussion, solutions workshop with the Bulletin to continue this discussion. On Tuesday, September 13th, will be our next City Club Forum in partnership with the Bend Young Professionals. And we'll be talking about our shifting generations and what that means all the way from the workforce down to our civil society. So more information will be released for those that subscribe to our newsletter on Monday. And then please visit cityclubco.org for more information about being a member, a sponsor, or our future forums. Thank you for being here today. Please to continue to cultivate conversation about issues that connect us to build a strong community.